The hegemony of had conquered 17 species across 4 spiral arms of the galaxy. Their soldiers, the elite guard known as the Owl, had never lost a war. They stood 7 feet tall, covered in natural armor made of bonded chitin that could stop most weapons. They were trained from the moment they hatched to kill without mercy or hesitation. For 3,000 years, they had been the terror that kept conquered worlds obedient. When humanity refused to surrender, High Commander OK did not worry. He had heard this before from other species. They all refused at first. They all submitted in the end. He gathered 3 legions of his finest owl warriors and sent them to the human colony world called New Providence. It would be a simple mission. Kill enough humans to make an example and the rest would fall in line. The first battle happened at a place the humans called Pass. It was a narrow canyon that led to the colony's main city. OK's scouts reported that about 200 human soldiers were defending the canyon against his 3,000 elite warriors. The humans had fewer weapons, worse armor, and no way to escape. Every military calculation said they would surrender or try to run. OK set up his command post on a ridge overlooking the canyon. He used his optical enhancers to study the enemy position. What he saw made him feel strange in a way he could not name. The human soldiers were laughing. Their commander was a small female with very short hair. She walked among her troops, touching their shoulders and speaking words OK could not hear, but he could see their faces clearly through his enhancers. Some of the humans were embracing each other. Others checked their weapons with a casual ease, like they were preparing for a simple training exercise instead of certain death. A few were passing around small metal containers and drinking something. Then OK gave the order to advance. His warriors began marching down into the canyon, their chitinous feet clicking against the rock in perfect unison. The sound had made entire civilizations tremble. The humans did not tremble. Instead, they took their positions behind rocks and makeshift barriers. And as the owl approached, something happened that OK had never seen in all his years of war. Every single human soldier smiled. Not the desperate grimace of trapped prey, not the wild expression of soldiers who had lost their minds to fear. These were real smiles, warm and almost peaceful, like they were greeting old friends instead of facing death. "High Commander," his lieutenant said, standing beside him on the ridge. His mandibles clicked together in confusion. "They know they cannot win. Why do they show pleasure?" OK had no answer. The battle began. The owl expected it to last 30 minutes at most. They were wrong. The humans held Pass for 9 hours. They used every rock, every shadow, every inch of ground. When their guns ran out of ammunition, they used knives. When their knives broke, they used their hands. They pulled wounded owl warriors into holes and killed them in the dark. And through it all, they kept smiling. OK watched a human male take 3 shots to his chest but keep firing his weapon until he finally collapsed. As he fell, his lips were curved upward. He watched a female soldier tackle a owl warrior twice her size off a cliff, both of them falling to their deaths. She was laughing the whole way down. The owl had fought many species. They had faced enemies who screamed in terror and enemies who roared with rage. They had never faced enemies who seemed happy to die. As the hours passed and the human numbers grew smaller, OK noticed something else strange. His warriors were slowing down. They were not tired or wounded. They were hesitating. The owl elite guard, who had been bred without the capacity for fear, were hesitating. Finally, after 9 hours, the owl broke through the last human position. Only a handful of defenders remained, all of them wounded and surrounded. Standard procedure was to capture them for interrogation. But as the warriors moved in, one of the human soldiers shouted something. The others nodded, and then they all raised small devices in their hands. OK suddenly understood. He tried to give the order to retreat, but it was too late. The humans had wired the entire canyon with explosives. They had been sitting on enough firepower to bring down the mountains on both sides. and they had waited until the owl were fully committed before triggering them. The last image Okay's optical feed captured before the avalanche was a young human male. He was wounded badly, bleeding from cuts all over his body. One of his arms hung useless at his side. He could not have survived more than a few more minutes even without the explosion. He was looking directly at the High Commander's position. He raised his good hand and pointed his thumb upward in what Okay later learned was a human gesture of approval. Then he winked. Then he pressed the button. 1,000,000 tons of rock buried 600 owl warriors along with the last human defenders of Pass. Okay himself barely escaped, dragged to safety by his personal guards as the world collapsed around them. That night, Okay stood at the edge of the massive grave of stone and stared at it for a long time. His lieutenant approached carefully. "High Commander, we have won. The pass is open. We can advance on the city." "We have won," Okay repeated, but his voice sounded empty. He had seen species fight desperately before. He had seen them rage against their destruction with everything they had. He had seen them plead for mercy and offer anything to survive. He had never seen one smile at death like it was a gift. "These humans," he said slowly, "what do we know about their psychology?" "Very little, High Commander. They are a young species, barely space-faring. Their military technology is at least 3 generations behind ours. And yet 200 of them held 3,000 of our finest warriors for 9 hours and killed 600 of them. They had the advantage of terrain, High Commander." Okay turned to look at his lieutenant. "They had explosives. They could have detonated them immediately. They could have brought down the canyon before we ever entered it and escaped through the mountains. Why did they wait?" The lieutenant's mandibles clicked in confusion. "I do not know. They waited because they wanted to kill more of us. They knew they would die. They accepted it, and they wanted to take as many of us with them as possible." Okay turned back to the pile of rocks. That young one at the end with his gesture and his smile. He was not afraid. He was not resigned. He was pleased. He was genuinely pleased to die if it meant killing more of us. Perhaps he was mentally damaged. They were all smiling, every single one of them, from the beginning until the end. The lieutenant had no response to that. Okay stood there for another hour, thinking. In his long career, he had learned that every species had a weakness. The silicon hives of feared isolation, the warrior castes of the could not bear dishonor, the crystalline beings of the outer rim would surrender rather than see their ancient structures damaged. What was the weakness of a species that smiled at death? He did not know, and for the first time in his life, High Commander Okay of the Al Elite Guard felt something cold moving through his body. It was not fear, because he had been bred without the capacity for fear. But it was something very close. He gave the order to advance on Providence City at dawn, but he also sent a message to High Command requesting additional forces. He had a feeling he was going to need them. The news of Pass spread through the AL ranks faster than any official report could travel. Soldiers talked to each other in the dark hours when their officers were not watching. They spoke in whispers, clicking their mandibles softly so the sound would not carry. The stories they told were strange and unsettling. Senior Lieutenant heard the first version from a scout who had survived the canyon collapse. The scout was a veteran of 20 campaigns, a warrior who had killed members of 6 different species in hand-to-hand combat. His voice shook as he described what he had seen. "They did not fight like prey," the scout said. "When prey is cornered, it panics. It makes mistakes. These humans made no mistakes. Every move they made was calculated to cost us more lives." "They were defending their home," replied. "Desperation can make any species dangerous." "This was not desperation. I have seen desperate creatures fight, Lieutenant. They fight with fear in their eyes. These humans had no fear. They had joy." That word spread quickly through the barracks. Joy. The humans fought with joy. It made no sense. Nothing in AL training or experience could explain it. When you were about to die, you did not feel joy. You felt terror or rage or numb acceptance, not joy. But soldier after soldier reported the same thing. The humans smiled. They laughed. Some of them sang songs as they charged into certain death. A warrior named described watching a human female hold a position alone against 12 AL attackers. She was wounded in the first exchange, bleeding badly from her side. She should have retreated or surrendered. Instead, she propped herself against a rock, raised her weapon, and killed 4 more warriors before they finally brought her down. And in the moment before she died, she shouted something in her strange language. The translation software in his helmet processed the words. "Tell my kids I made it count." She was still smiling when she fell. Tried to make sense of this. He was a senior officer with 40 cycles of service. He had helped conquer the silicon hives of a species that could survive temperatures hot enough to melt steel. He had broken the warrior castes of the who had been engineered for combat over 10,000 generations. He had never failed in a mission. He had never requested a transfer. He requested one now. His commander, Sub-Marshal Orr, was surprised. "You are one of our finest officers. Why do you wish to leave?" Struggled to find words that would make sense. These humans are different from any enemy we have faced. Different how? Their technology is inferior. Their numbers are small. We outnumber them 20 to 1 on this world. It is not about numbers or technology. Paused, trying to explain something he did not fully understand himself. When we fight other species, they want to live. Their goal is survival. We can use that against them. We can break their will by showing them that fighting means death. Yes, this is standard doctrine. But the humans do not want to live. Or rather, they want something else more than they want to live. They have already accepted death before the battle begins. They treat dying as if it is a gift they are giving to us. His voice dropped. "I have killed thousands of enemies in my career. I have never once thought that my blade was answering someone's prayer. But these humans, they welcome death. They are grateful for it. And I cannot be the thing that grants someone's deepest wish." Or dismissed his concerns and the transfer request. There was a war to win, and the hegemony needed experienced officers. 3 days later, walked into the wilderness without his weapons or supplies. He was never seen again. He was the first AL elite guard to desert in over 400 years. He was not the last. The desertion started slowly. A scout team that went out on patrol and simply never returned. A supply officer who left his post in the middle of the night and vanished. A communications technician who destroyed his equipment and then sat down in the middle of a field to wait for death. When the missing soldiers were investigated, their comrades reported similar conversations. All of them had become obsessed with the human smiles. They asked questions that no one could answer. Why were the humans happy to die? What did they know that the AL did not? What were they seeing in those final moments that brought them such peace? Then the desertions got worse. A whole squad surrendered to human forces rather than engage them in battle. When they were recovered in a prisoner exchange, they were nearly catatonic. The squad leader, a warrior with 30 years of combat experience, kept repeating the same phrase. "The smiling ones, the smiling ones, they thanked us for coming." Another group of soldiers against their officers and tried to steal a ship to leave the planet. When they were stopped, they fought against their own comrades with a desperation they had never shown against the humans. Half of them were killed. The survivors were executed for treason. But before they died, they gave testimony that disturbed everyone who heard it. "We are not afraid of the humans," one of them said. "We are afraid of what the humans know. They know something about death that we do not. They have found peace in it, and we cannot find peace anywhere." High Command was baffled. The AL Elite Guard had been designed without the capacity for cowardice. Their fear responses had been bred out of them over dozens of generations. They did not flee from superior forces, and they certainly did not flee from inferior ones. The biological programming that should have made them fearless warriors was simply not working. Because this was not fear. This was something else entirely, something their genetic engineers had never anticipated. It was existential dread. The owl had been raised to believe that death was simply the end. When you died, you stopped existing. There was nothing to fear because there was nothing afterward. But the humans acted as if death was not an end but a transformation, as if dying in battle was not a loss but a victory, as if there was something waiting for them on the other side, something beautiful and welcoming. The owl did not believe in such things, but watching the humans die with smiles on their faces planted a seed of doubt. What if they were wrong? What if there was something more? What if the humans knew a secret that the owl had never discovered in all their thousands of years of conquest? The doubt spread like a disease through the ranks, and with it came the desertions. It all came to a breaking point at the siege of Providence City. High Commander OK had gathered his remaining forces for a final assault. 8,000 elite guard warriors against perhaps 500 human defenders. The city had been bombed for weeks. Most of it was rubble and ruins. The humans had nowhere to run and no hope of victory. By every calculation, it would be a massacre. Then the human general sent a message on an open channel that every owl soldier could hear. He was an older male with a weathered face covered in scars. His eyes were calm and steady, and on his lips was that same strange smile that had haunted owl dreams for weeks. "Owl soldiers," he said in a voice that was almost gentle, "we know you are watching, we know you are listening, and we want you to understand something." He paused, and when he continued, there was warmth in his voice. "Behind us are 4 million civilians, our families, our children, our parents, our friends. We will not let you reach them. We have mined every building in this city. We have rigged every street with explosives, and every one of us is carrying enough firepower to destroy a city block." He held up a small device in his hand. "We will not surrender. We will not retreat. And when you come for us, and we know you will come, we will make you pay for every inch of ground in blood and fire." His smile grew wider. There was genuine happiness in it. "We are looking forward to it. We really are. It is going to be glorious." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small photograph. He held it up to the camera so everyone could see it. A woman and 2 children, smiling at the camera. "This is my family, my wife, my son and daughter. They were evacuated last week. They are safe now. They are going to live because of what we do here today." His voice was thick with emotion, but his smile never wavered. "So I have nothing left to lose and everything left to give." He laughed then, a real laugh full of warmth and joy. "Come and get it, soldiers. Come and let us show you what humanity is made of." The transmission ended. OK gave the order to advance. His warriors began to move toward the city, but they moved slowly. Their formation was loose and uneven. Officers had to shout orders multiple times before they were obeyed. And then one by one, soldiers stopped moving entirely. 1,600 AL elite guards refused to advance. Some of them dropped their weapons and sat down on the ground. Others turned and walked away from the city, ignoring the orders screamed at them by their commanders. A few simply stood in place and shook, their chitinous armor clicking together as tremors ran through their bodies. "What is happening?" OK demanded. "Why are they stopping?" His lieutenant checked the reports coming in from across the line. His mandibles clicked rapidly in disbelief. "They are refusing to fight, High Commander. They say they will not attack soldiers who want to die." "This is impossible. They cannot refuse. They were bred to obey." "They say they would rather face execution than face those smiles again." High Commander OK looked out at his army, at the chaos spreading through ranks that had never known chaos before. He looked at the ruined city ahead, where 500 humans waited with explosives and smiles and absolute certainty. And he finally understood. The humans had found a weapon more powerful than any bomb or bullet. They had weaponized their own deaths. They had turned sacrifice into victory and defeat into triumph. And they had broken something in the owl that could never be fixed. OK gave the order to withdraw. The siege of Providence City ended without a final battle. 1,600 elite guards were arrested for desertion and disobedience. High Commander OK was recalled to the hegemony in disgrace. But before he left, he wrote a report for High Command. In it, he tried to explain what had happened on New Providence. He struggled for days to find the right words. In the end, he wrote this: "We came to this world expecting to fight an enemy that feared death. We found instead an enemy that embraces it. We do not know how to defeat an army that is already dead in their hearts. We do not know how to break the will of soldiers who have already given everything away. We came here to teach humans about the power of the hegemony. They have taught us instead about the power of joy. I do not know how we can win this war. I do not know if we should try." The message was classified at the highest level, but somehow copies of it spread through the hegemony military, and everywhere it went, Al's soldiers asked the same question. What do the humans know about death that makes them smile? No one had an answer. The news of the mass desertion at Providence City spread through the hegemony like wildfire. It was the largest military failure in 300 years. 1,600 elite guards, soldiers who had been engineered to be incapable of disobedience, had looked at smiling humans and decided that death in battle was better than facing those smiles. High Command convened an emergency council on the hegemony of Prime. The greatest military minds and scientists in the Empire gathered to discuss a single question: what was wrong with the humans? A named Ara presented her findings after months of studying captured human communications, literature, and historical records. She stood before the assembled council with her research data displayed on screens around the room. The humans have a concept that is central to their entire civilization, she explained. They call it sacrifice. It appears in almost every aspect of their culture. Their religions speak of gods who died so that others might live. Their histories celebrate warriors who gave their lives for their people. Their stories, from the simplest tales told to children to their most sophisticated art, almost always involve someone dying for something greater than themselves. She brought up images on the screens: human religious symbols, historical paintings of battles, scenes from their entertainment media. We assumed they were a young species, primitive and easily conquered. We were wrong. They have been preparing for this moment for 10,000 years. Every story they tell their children is about the glory of giving everything for something you love. Every hero in their mythology is someone who sacrificed themselves. They do not see death as an ending. They see it as the ultimate gift they can give. The council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This explains the smiles, Ara continued. When a human soldier dies in battle protecting their people, they are not experiencing loss. They are experiencing fulfillment. They are becoming the heroes they have dreamed about since childhood. They are achieving the highest honor their culture recognizes. She paused to let this sink in. We thought we were invading a primitive species. We were actually invading a civilization of willing martyrs who have been dreaming of a worthy death since before they discovered fire. The room was silent for a long moment. Then the Supreme Marshal, the highest military commander in the hegemony, spoke. How do we defeat an enemy like this? I do not know if we can, Ara admitted. Our entire military doctrine is based on breaking the enemy's will to fight. We threaten them with death until they surrender. But you cannot threaten someone with something they desire. You cannot use death as a weapon against people who see death as a reward. The council debated for days. They tried new strategies. Supreme Marshal or took over command of the campaign with fresh legions and different tactics. No more direct ground battles. They would bombard human worlds from orbit, reduce them to glass from a safe distance where no one would have to see those smiles. It did not help. Human ships outmatched and developed new tactics of their own. They called it the Forlorn Hope. Small crews would pilot damaged ships directly into AL fleet formations on suicide runs. But it was not the attacks themselves that damaged the hegemony forces. It was everything that came with them. The humans broadcast their faces on visual channels the entire way in, smiling, laughing, sometimes singing. A cruiser captain was recorded teaching his crew a card game called poker in the final minutes before impact. A destroyer crew held hands and recited something from one of their religious texts. A frigate commander raised a glass of liquid and offered a toast to absent friends and present enemies. They died by the thousands, and they took tens of thousands of AL with them, not in direct casualties but in broken morale. Every time a human ship made its final run, every time those smiling faces appeared on the screens, more AL soldiers lost the will to fight. The desertion rate climbed higher every month. Elite guards walked off their posts. Officers requested transfers to the other side of the galaxy. Some warriors simply stopped eating and let themselves die rather than face another smiling human. Meanwhile, the humans grew bolder. On the colony world of New Eden, a human resistance cell was surrounded by AL forces. They were offered surrender terms. Their leader, a young woman named Sarah, responded with a video message. "Thank you for the offer," she said with a gentle smile. "But we will have to decline. You see, my grandmother was at pass. She died making sure those explosives went off at exactly the right moment. My father flew one of the Forlorn Hope ships into your flagship over Mars, and my daughter is watching this message from a safe bunker 3 systems away." She held up a small device. "Someday she will tell her children about what we did here, and those children will tell their children. And 1,000 years from now, people will still remember that when the AL came, we stood our ground and smiled." Her smile widened. "So please come closer. We have prepared such a welcome for you." The AL commander ordered his troops to pull back. He was not willing to lose any more soldiers to smiling humans. The war dragged on, but the outcome became more and more obvious. The hegemony was not losing battles. They were winning almost every engagement, but they were losing the war anyway, one broken soldier at a time. Finally, after 3 years of fighting, the Hegemony Strategic Council voted to do something they had never done before in their entire history. They voted to sue for peace with an inferior power. The Treaty of Providence was negotiated over 6 months. Humanity received full sovereignty over their worlds and a seat on the Hegemony Council. They received reparations for the damage done to their colonies. They were recognized as equals under hegemony law. In exchange, the humans agreed to only one condition. They would never again smile at AL soldiers. When this condition was explained to the human negotiators, they found it hilarious. They actually had to take a break from the negotiations because they could not stop laughing. The signing ceremony was held on Providence City, rebuilt from the ruins of the siege. Representatives from the hegemony and humanity gathered in a great hall to mark the end of the war. Cameras broadcast the moment across 1,000 worlds. The human ambassador who signed the treaty was a young woman named Maria Santos. She had lost her entire family at pass, including her mother who had been part of the final defense. She approached the signing table with perfect diplomatic composure. Her face was calm and serious. She shook hands with the hegemony representatives, exchanged formal words, and signed the documents that would end the war. But as she looked up at the cameras, observers noticed something strange. Her lips were perfectly still, set in a neutral expression appropriate for the solemn occasion, but her eyes were different. Her eyes were smiling. The AL delegation noticed. Several of them grew very still. One of them made a strange sound, almost like a whimper. The delegation requested a brief recess. When they came back, their numbers had decreased. Several members of the party had to be escorted out by their colleagues, unable to continue. They gave no explanation for their departure. The treaty was signed, the war was over, humanity had won. In the months that followed, academics and historians tried to understand what had happened. How had a young species with inferior technology defeated the greatest military power in the galaxy? The official AL histories blamed supply problems and overextended lines. Human historians had a different answer. They pointed to Pass, where 200 soldiers held a canyon against 3,000 warriors because they were not afraid to die. They pointed to the Forlorn Hope ships, crewed by volunteers who competed for the honor of flying into enemy formations. They pointed to Sarah and thousands like her, who faced overwhelming odds with a smile on their lips and joy in their hearts. The humans had found a truth that the owl could not understand. Death was not the end. It was a transformation. When you gave your life for something greater than yourself, you became part of that thing forever. The soldiers who died at Pass lived on in the people they protected. The crews of the Forlorn Hope ships lived on in the children who grew up free because of their sacrifice. The owl had spent 3,000 years teaching the galaxy to fear death. The humans had spent 10,000 years learning to love it. That was why they smiled. Years after the war, a AL historian named Ara wrote a book about the conflict. It became required reading in military academies across the hegemony. The final chapter contained a warning that would be remembered for generations. We won a war against a species that had mastered something we never understood, Ara wrote. They had mastered joy. They found happiness in sacrifice and peace in death. They turned every loss into a victory and every defeat into a triumph. We thought we were teaching them about power. They taught us instead about something far more dangerous. She ended the book with a simple observation. Never go to war against a species that smiles when they die. You cannot defeat an enemy who has already won. The book was classified as restricted reading for centuries, but copies spread anyway, passed from soldier to soldier, officer to officer. And in the barracks and wardrooms of the AL military, warriors who had never faced a human still spoke in whispers about the smiling ones. Some of them even wondered, in the quiet of their own minds, what the humans knew that made them so happy to die. Some of them wondered if maybe, just maybe, the humans had discovered something wonderful. But they never asked out loud, because asking that question out loud meant you were already lost. On distant human worlds, children grew up hearing stories about the war. They learned about the heroes of Pass and the brave crews of the Forlorn Hope. They learned that, when danger came, their ancestors stood tall and smiled and said this far and no further. And in homes across 100 planets, grandparents taught there an old phrase from Earth, words that had been passed down through generations long before humanity ever reached the stars. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. The children learned to say these words with a smile, and they meant it. The war was over, but the lesson would never be forgotten. Human beings smile at death because they know something that other species do not. They know that love is stronger than fear, that sacrifice is stronger than survival, and that joy can be found in the most unlikely places. Even at the end. Especially at the end.